Welcome back to Novel Writing 101, the 21-week course where I teach you how to write the first draft of your novel. Now, today is week 3, and we're going to dive into outlining and how to pick the right plot structure for your story. Ready? Let's get into it. Now, before we jump into today's lecture, I want you to head over to angiekadis.com/novelwriting101 and download your free worksheets because we're going to be referencing them a lot. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to be tackling the outline of your story. And depending on your personal creative process, this could look like an elaborate outline with timelines, or it could be something unstructured and open-ended. And today we'll be discussing different plot structures and how you may or may not find them useful. But before we jump into that, I want to ask you one important question. Are you a pantser or a plotter? If you're wondering what the hell I'm even asking you, let me break it down. A pantser is someone who flies by the seat of their pants. Essentially, someone who likes to let ideas come to them freely and not be bogged down with an extensive outline or rules that tell them what they should write when they should write it. This is also referred to as discovery writing because you're discovering the story as you go. And sometimes this can lead to new pathways in the narrative and creative ideas that you had scarcely imagined. A plotter, on the other hand, is someone who likes to know where the story is going before they ever sit down to write it. They rely on thorough outlines, planning, plotting, so they know this is happening all along the way and I have a solution for every part of it. Now, one of your worksheets for this week is a fun exercise to determine whether you're more of a pantser or a plotter. But I want you to keep in mind that there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to the writing process. Your process and your creativity is personal, and what works for me may not work for you or the next person or the next person. So when you're determining where on this spectrum of pantser or plotter you end up, realize that you're probably not going to fit into one label perfectly over the other. There's going to be some overlap and some things that bleed over that you really enjoy. But wherever you think you may fall on the spectrum of pantser and plotter, keep it in mind as we go through the rest of the lecture because it will help you figure out what plot structures may work for you and if you really need an outline or not. Now, your plot is the most important part of your story. It's the path that's going to guide you through the writing process and help transform your premise from a singular idea into something great. And how you tackle this feat is up to you, and there's a lot of ways to approach your plot. And whether you realize it or not, how you start your story and how you present information to readers is going to have a significant impact on the flow of your narrative. For example, if you immediately choose to thrust your characters into danger, that's going to set a really fast-paced tone for your book. But on the other hand, if you open up with a lot of exposition and setting the stage of the world and what might be to come, that's going to have a much different effect. Over time, patterns in storytelling have developed. These things help us progress the narrative, keep readers engaged, and deliver on expectations. These are our plot structures. Now, there's many different types of plot structures, but I want you to keep in mind again that what works for someone else might not work for you. There is no right or wrong answer when it comes to picking or ignoring certain plot structures. A plot structure is only as good as it is useful to you. So keep an open mind when you go through today's lecture. The more information you have, the better, because you won't know what works for you until you experiment with what doesn't. Like I said, there's many different kinds of plot structures, and today we're only going to be focusing on 4. The Fiction curve, the 3-act structure, the hero's journey, and the 7-point story structure. The Fiction curve is a fairly simple plot structure that relies on constant escalating action and crises that lead your story to an inevitable boiling point, aka your climax. Here's a visual representation of what that looks like. And there are 3 key moments in the Fiction curve: your rising action, your climax, and your falling action. Now, your rising action is your series of crises. This constant barrage of catastrophes and obstacles and threats leads the story higher and higher, escalating until we get to our inevitable boiling point, your climax. Now, the climax is where all the tension that's been brewing from your rising action meets its peak. This is your big fight scene. This is your grandiose confession in a love story. Everything has been leading up to this moment. Lastly, the falling action is your resolution. This is where the reader learns the aftermath of what comes after the climax and how loose ends are tied up. And with every ending to a story, this can be left on a cliffhanger, vague, or buttoned up nicely. The Fichtean curve is great for stories with a lot of action and tense moments, because this rising action, these constant crises that are occurring, raise the stakes, push the narrative ahead, and build to this what's going to happen next moment. Like I said, this is a great structure to choose if you have an action-packed narrative, or if you want something that's more bare bones, that you don't have to flesh out every detail in your outline. If you're leaning more towards being a pantser, I think this is a good place to start. The 3-act structure is your tried and true story format. It's your quintessential beginning, middle, and end. Here's a visual representation of what it looks like. And aside from just being broken up into 3 acts, there's a lot of key moments along the way. In Act 1, we have the exposition, the inciting incident, and plot point 1. Kicking off the story, the exposition is setting the scene for what is normal in your world and what the reader can expect. This is typically it was a normal day, but then, that's where your inciting incident comes into play. It's the singular event that kicks the whole story off into motion. It's the conflict, obstacle, or dilemma that sets everything off kilter in your main character's world. Next is plot point 1. This is where your main character faces a challenge from what's come of the inciting incident and has to make a decision that moves the story forward. Then the story shifts into Act 2, and we start with rising action. And like the Fichtean curve, this is where the constant crises and dilemmas and obstacles raise the stakes and keep building the story up and up into tension. Then your story hits its midpoint. This is the event that upends everything. If your main character was getting by before, this event is unable to be ignored. The final key moment in Act 2 is plot point 2, and this is where your main character faces a major setback or failure. This is a major blow to whatever they were hoping to achieve, and this changes things for them. Moving into Act 3, we're starting with build-up, and this is where the main character progresses forward and prepares for that final conflict. Like the name suggests, this should build up the tension and have the reader preparing and on the edge of their seat for what happens next. Then, finally, the story reaches the climax, and this is where that main character faces the final threat or obstacle. And whether they fail or succeed is up to you, but everything should be building up to this moment. At the end of the story, we have denouement, and this is your resolution where outcomes are revealed and loose ends are potentially addressed. This is where your story wraps up. The 3-act structure is a very popular plotting method that works well across most genres. It's easily adaptable and sets a straightforward pace, so if you're not quite sure where to start with outlining, this is a good choice. The hero's journey is a 12-step plotting structure based on mythology. It's really common in the fantasy genre, especially when a main character has to go on a quest. Here's a visual representation of what that looks like. And while the hero's journey can be broken up into 3 acts, we're going to look at the key moments along this wheel in the illustration. First, we have the ordinary world, and like exposition in the 3-act structure, this just sets the scene for everyday life. There are no major threats or obstacles to overcome, just average occurrences. Then we have call to adventure. This is your inciting incident. It disrupts the hero's world and sets everything into motion. Next, the story shifts to refusal of the call. Whatever happened in the call to adventure, the hero is really hesitant about it. Whether they don't know if they can face it or they don't want to, they refuse the call to action. But next, there's meeting the mentor. This is where the hero meets someone who will either advise them or prepare them for this journey. You can probably already think of a lot of movies and books that do this. This is a wise old person, a wizard, a parental figure, someone with authority that gives this person insight and advice and strength to move ahead. This changes things for the hero and bolsters them for what comes next, which is crossing the first threshold. This is where the hero embarks into the unknown. Whatever normal everyday life was portrayed in the beginning of the book, the hero is fully stepping away from that and beginning this journey of theirs. Next comes tests, allies, enemies. This is where the hero faces challenges, makes alliances, and gains foes. Everything that happens here progresses the story and builds up to what comes later. Then we have approach to the inmost cave. This is where the hero gets so close to what they need to do, but there's still obstacles to face. Think of this as a mini milestone. The end is in sight for the hero, but they still have a lot it's going to take to get there. Then the story reaches the ordeal. This is a great threat or obstacle that they need to overcome. This is high stakes, and the greatest challenge that the heroes had to face thus far. Next, there's reward, or also called seizing the sword. The hero gains some sort of reward or information. It's a boon that helps bolster them for what comes next, especially after everything that just happened in the ordeal. Now, the road back is where the hero begins to journey back to the ordinary world, the life they lived before. But the story is far from over. There are still obstacles to overcome. Next, we have what everything has been building up to, the resurrection. This is where the hero faces a final climactic obstacle or challenge. Everything they've done and everything they've learned has been building up to this. Then we have our resolution and conclusion in Return with the Elixir. This is where the hero returns to the ordinary world, but is transformed. They are a new version of themselves after everything they've gone through. And whether that's good or bad, the reader knows that things have changed. Now, like I said, the hero's journey is a great plot structure to use if you have a main character who has to embark on some sort of journey. But it's not just for fantasy. You can incorporate this plot structure into any novel that has themes of learning lessons and overcoming obstacles. The final plot structure we're going to talk about is the 7-point story structure. This loose framework focuses on turning points and milestones that move the story forward. And compared to the hero's journey or the 3-act structure, it's very simple, but it's also useful. The story begins with the hook. This is where you draw readers in by setting the scene. Give them an idea of what to expect, and then pull the rug out from under them with what comes next, which is plot point 1. This is your inciting incident. This is everything that sets the story into motion. Then we have pinch point 1, and this is your obstacle, threat, or challenge that arises. Then we have midpoint. This is your turning point in your story. Whereas before the main character was taking a more passive approach to their situation, now they decide to take action. Pinch point 2 brings more obstacles, threats, and escalations. These are major setbacks for the main character and moves the story towards whatever conflict looms. Then there's a moment of relief with plot point 2. This is a breakthrough for your main character. They know what it's going to take to be victorious, but they still have things to face. Finally, the story hits its peak with resolution. This is the combination of your climax and the resulting conclusion. Everything has been building up to this moment. That event happens, and then the story ends. The 7-point story structure is great for those who think they might lean more towards pantsing or somewhere stuck in the middle between being a plotter or a pantser, because it gives you a lot of foundation to work with without forcing you to hash out every minute detail. You can build out those story beats, but also make creative changes on the fly. So those are the 4 plot structures we're going to talk about today. And like I said before, you don't have to pick one. If none of these stand out to you, or if you do your own research into other methods and none of those stand out to you, do your own thing. Your writing process is for you. Don't force yourself to do something that's going to clash with your creativity or style. If you don't want to do an outline, don't do one. If you want to do a 25-page outline where you dissect every detail, go for it. This is your story. Tell it how you want. Now, your main homework for this week is the plot structures worksheet. And it goes over every single plot structure we talked about today in a little more detail and has some space in the back for you to jot down some notes. Now again, whatever you decide to do with plot structures and outlines, I just want you to commit to something. If you don't want to do it, commit to that. If you do, do that. We're in our final 2 weeks of our prep and planning stage. After this, we have to start writing. So I want you guys to be as prepared as you need to be. Whatever decisions you make about outlining or not outlining, I just want you to be sure about them. Now, you may be thinking, Angie, I lean more towards the pantser side, but I'm terrified of just starting writing without having any sort of plan. And if that's you, I've got you covered, don't worry, because my process is somewhat on the pantser side with a little dash of outline, but a lot of just chaos thrown in. Before I start writing, I like to do what I call a brain dump outline. This is where I go chapter by chapter and just kind of word vomit everything that needs to happen. I'll essentially just do a really rough, long-winded paragraph of like, okay, so they're here and it starts out here and then this person comes in and then this is revealed and this happens and this happens. And sometimes I'll throw in some dialogue if I'm inspired while I'm working on this outline, or if I've had notes saved in my phone forever that are like snippets that I need to add in. So it's really just a really messy, loose outline. I've tried personally working with plot structures and it makes my brain go crazy. I am not good with being super tied into like, okay, now it's plot point 2 and you have to do this and what comes after. I can't work like that. It's so weird. Like, I just need to like innately rely on what I know should happen next. Like, this is the flow of the story. Like, is it going to fit into this structure? Probably not. It's just kind of like my brain is just telling me what to do. But this outlining style I've come up with gives me some guardrails of like, okay, chapter 7 starts this way, and then I have a bunch of details on the middle, and then it ends this way. But I've noticed a lot of the times when I'm writing my first drafts, I'll start, and then somewhere in the middle, I'll have this massive, like, discovery writing moment where I'm just like, okay, we're veering off this way. I don't know how this is happening, but somehow I bring it back to, like, where it needs to end. So it works out because I got from point A to point B. What happened in the middle is none of my business. It just worked out. And if I finish my first draft and I look at it and I'm like, the pacing in the middle is so awful, I need to fix that, that's okay. I fix it in edits. Because first drafts are supposed to be messy and imperfect. Your goal should just be to get the story out. Everything can be refined in edits. So I've included 2 additional documents for you guys this week. One is my template for my messy outline style, so you can kind of see the mini guardrails I put on myself. And then the second extra document is an example of how I would fill that out if I was starting a first draft. I also like to include, of course, the project title, what my POV is, what my tense is, what the length I'm going for is, and just a few other details. I have a section on like character notes and world building and just notes to myself. So as I'm going through this outlining process and I'm like, oh my gosh, the main character needs to have this color hair or this scar or this weird background story. Like I just go fill that in little messy paragraph formats and then get back to my chapter by chapter outline. So check out the documents if you want. Maybe they're useful, maybe they're not. Maybe you see it and like, oh, I actually want to tweak this and make my own style. Totally fine. Dabble in anything you want because, like I said, you're going to need to try a bunch of different things to figure out what your perfect process is. Okay, that's all the lecture content I have for you guys today, but I wanted to take a minute to break down the homework because there is a lot. Your first thing to do is to complete that pantser versus plotter worksheet. Like I said, it's just a really fun exercise. It should take you no more than 5 minutes, but it will give you an idea of like where you fall on that pantser versus plotter spectrum. Next, I want you to read through and fill out the plot structures worksheet. Like I said, this just covers the 4 plot structures we went over today with some additional information and a section in the back where you can jot down some notes. And I want you to make that decision on what plot structure are you using, if you're using one, what kind of outline are you doing, if you're doing an outline at all. Just make that decision. And finally, I want you to start working on whatever your version of an outline will be. This homework assignment is going to stretch over weeks 3 and 4 because, like I said, these are our last weeks of the planning and preparation stage. You don't need to finish your outline at the end of this week. Again, we're going to have time to work on it, but I want you to get a head start so when week 4 hits, you're not like, oh my god, I have to do an entire outline in 7 days. Before we wrap this up, I wanted to give a quick disclaimer. Now, when I was creating this course, I really struggled with how many weeks to allot for the outlining process. Like I said, what works for me may not work for you. Some people take a month to outline a novel, some people don't do an outline, some people take a year to outline a novel because they have so much detail they want to put into it and all these plots and twists they want to flesh out beforehand, which is totally fine. However, I didn't want the focus of this course to be so heavily on outlining because at the end of the day, to me, the most important thing is starting the writing process and getting that draft finished because the first draft is your foundation for every single iteration that comes after that. You can't make the story better if you don't have a story to begin with. So I only gave us 2 weeks to outline in this 21-week course. However, I'm saying this with a huge caveat, so hold on. If you need an extra week or 2 to work on your outline, that's fine. I'm going to allow that. Pause the course, finish your outline, come back to the course, start writing. However, I know what it feels like to start something that kind of terrifies you, where the imposter syndrome and the fear of failure kicks in and you start making excuses for yourself to push off and delay your dreams. So, I don't want you to say, oh, Angie, I need an extra couple weeks to outline, and then it turning into, okay, well, it's still not ready and I still don't know this and it needs to be better and just keep snowballing until you're just putting it off to put it off. I don't want you to hold yourself back and I don't want you to use the outline as an excuse that you're not ready to start. You could spend 6 months on an outline, but if you don't take the step to start writing your story, all that work you've done is irrelevant. So, this is my caveat. Take all the time you need to work on this outline, but do not use it as an excuse to hold yourself back and quit before you start. Okay, I'm done chastising you for things you may or may not be doing. Let's get into the outro. Congrats, you finished another lecture. Thank you so much for sticking around. Like I said, this week, week 3, and next week, week 4, are really crucial because they're our final weeks in our planning and preparation stage. After this, we're jumping into the actual writing, which I am so excited about. So make sure you take the time this week to adequately prepare, read all the worksheets, do the exercises, start your outline, know what you're going to do before we get into the writing process so you're totally prepared. From here on out, the course is only going to require more of your time and energy. So, buckle up, know that I am here for you every step of the way. I'm only a comment or a DM away. Okay, that's it for today. I know it's been a very long lecture. Thank you for sticking around. As always, do your homework, and I'll see you next time.